Are you
Yes.
up for coming up here?
I am up.
Up for being upright? Yes, so ladies and gentlemen, or sorry, ladles and jelly spoons, gentlefolk and mischief makers, please put your hands together for the wonderful Millie Jackdaw.
I'm not sure where the wonderful Millie Jackdaw is, but Millie Jackdaw's here anyway. So,
Are you not wonder-filled?
So have you all kind of been brought up with stories? No, not everyone. It is a real blessing if you've had those fairy tales and folk tales told to you as a child. And this story that I'm going to tell might give you a little bit of a flavour of why it's so important, and the ins and outs that it can save you from in life. I'm just going to say a little introductory poem that I like to share, which also comments on this. How do we remember to remember? Stories trace a line from the beginning of time to keep in mind what guides mankind. When our brains strain to comprehend our collective journey, how we got ourselves into and may find a way back through this tangle, a story gives a handle. Like a candle, it illuminates our comings and goings, our folly and unknowings. So we may use mistakes for knowing. I think that's okay. It leads us to those regions where our allies wait in legions to deliver us to freedom in the winking of a dragon's eye. This story takes place not too far from here. If you travel south past Ceredigion, you come to Poppet Sands, and there's a woodland called Alti-Goid. And long ago there was a shepherd who lived in the region of those woodlands, and he used to pay the local landowner money to allow him to graze his sheep among the woods. He didn't have land of his own. He was very poor. He was married, and he and his wife had been childhood sweethearts and absolutely adored each other. When they had married, their families had clubbed together and helped them set up home. It was a humble dwelling, just one up, one down. But it was comfortable enough. It was warm, they had a good range that they would bring to a blaze to keep the house warm and to cook their food. They had a table and chairs and a dresser with cups and saucers. And there was a ladder to the upstairs bedroom and a straw-filled mattress and a cradle. And they had a little daughter, a beautiful little daughter who was their heart's blossom. The shepherd's name was Dewi Rees. And every morning when Dewi Rees got up, the same routine. He'd woke early because he had to go and tend to his sheep, and he would gaze a little while at his beloved wife, just thinking to himself how lucky he was. And he would just kiss her on the cheek, rise, look into the cradle at their little daughter, stroke her on the head, smile, and then make his way down the ladder, and then get the fire going in the range to get the room nice and warm for his wife and daughter when they awoke. He would cut 2 big thick slices of bread, lather them with something fatty. What would it be? Lard or something like that. Get a flask of water, and then he would go outside and there was a pump, and he would wash himself with cold water and the pump, putting on his clean clothes that had been left out the night before. And then he would make his way into the woods to watch over his ewes. But on this particular day, as he walked into the woods, he saw, to his surprise, a little Draenog, a hedgehog. And he expected the little Draenog to go running off down the path, but it didn't. He came closer to it. Perhaps it would roll up into a ball. Didn't do that either. Instead, it trotted a few steps away and then looked round at him, and then trotted a little more and looked round at him again. And he realised that this little Draenog was wanting him to follow. And so he did. He followed the little Draenog down the path into the deep, dark green woods that have featured so strongly in all the stories this evening. And he followed it until it took him off the main track into little winding paths, into areas of the wood that he'd never been to before, into a little clearing where there was a huge grey stone. And then it went over to the stone and nudged it with its nose. And Derry Reese realised the Draenog wanted him to lift the stone. So he did. And when he did so, he saw that beneath the stone was a gold coin. He'd never seen such a thing in his life before. It was beyond his wildest imaginings. He couldn't at first believe it, thought that he was imagining. And then he picked it up and it was real. A gold coin. His mind was racing. He looked around, put it in his pocket, and carried on with his day. That evening when he got home, he didn't even speak to his wife. He just went straight in the door, up the step ladders, up into the bedroom, and from underneath the bed pulled the little wooden box that he'd been given on their wedding day for their treasures. It was empty. They had no treasures up until now. He got great satisfaction of using the little key to open the box and place the gold coin into it, turning the key and putting the little box back under the mattress. That evening, he didn't speak much. His wife was curious. You're not the same as usual. What's on your mind? Something happened today. He said, no, nothing. He was very preoccupied and distant. She probed him a little more, but he just got irritated. And so she decided to drop the matter. The following day, Derry Reese got up as usual, but stepped straight out of bed, down the stairs. He didn't bother putting on the stove. He didn't bother lathering the lard on his bread. He did have a quick wash underneath the tap, put his clean clothes on, filled up a bottle of water, and then he stepped onto the woodland path. And there, once again, was the little Draenog. His heart began to pound with excitement as he followed it into the wood. Once again, round the little twisting, winding paths into the little clearing, there was the stone. Once more, lifting the stone to find, beneath it, another gold coin. If this would carry on, he would be the richest man in the county. Put it in his pocket. He began to think about what he could do with this money. His wife hadn't had a new dress since their wedding. Perhaps something for the daughter. Perhaps even a carriage. 2 gold coins. What would that be worth? Would he actually even be able to buy a piece of land with that money? And then not have to pay rent to the farmer? And then he'd have a proper earning, proper living. His mind was racing. But he wanted to surprise his wife. He wouldn't tell her anything about it until he'd gathered a bit more money and really put his mind to what he was going to do. And then he would surprise her. She'd be so happy. So that night he went home. Once again he pushed his way through the door, up the ladder, into the bedroom, the little brown box, coin in the box, under the bed, back downstairs. There was his wife. Derry, are you going to tell me what's going on? Nothing untoward. Derry, when we were married, you vowed that you would share everything with me. Up until now, we've always told each other everything. If there's something going on, I need to know about it. And she would not leave off of it. She kept needling him. And in the end, he just shouted at her, and the baby started crying. He pushed back his chair, and he went upstairs to bed early. And that night, they slept with their backs to one another. And Derry's wife had little soft tears running down her face. The next day, once more, Derry got up even earlier than the day before, ran downstairs, pulled on the same clothes as the day before, filled up some water, ran straight outside onto the woodland path, and he stopped. In horror, he saw not the Draenog, but another man. Harry Pritchard, the miller's son. And he was making his way down the little path. Harry couldn't believe it. He's going to find my rock. He's going to find my gold. That's my gold. And he began to hasten after Harry. He knew the way by now, but he kept Harry in sight and followed the way down the little winding, twisting path into the depths of the woods, into the little clearing. And there was Harry. He'd already reached the stone, and he had the coin in his hand. "Give that to me," said Derry. "It's mine." "Finders keepers," said Harry. "You thief! Give it to me! That's mine. I was here yesterday and the day before. The gold is mine." Harry just put it in his pocket. Derry was so frustrated. He clenched up his hand and bopped Harry on the chin. But Harry, he was tough. He was the miller's son. He was used to lugging great sacks of grain around and millstones. He was big and burly. It barely harmed him. But when his fist met Derry's chin, it was another matter. And soon Derry was flat out on the ground, unconscious. When he came to, there was no sign of Harry or the gold. He was mortified. When he got home, he didn't even sit down to eat with his wife and daughter. The baby was whining and crying, and his wife just looked at him desperately, so sad and forlorn. He just went upstairs to bed. The following day, he got up really, really early, before dawn, ran downstairs, pulled on his clothes, straight out of the door, onto the woodland path. No sign of anybody. No sign of Harry, no sign of the Draenog. But he knew his way by now. He would get ahead. Down the little path he went, the twisting, winding ways, into the deep, dark woods, into the clearing. There was the rock. No one here. He reached down, lifted it up. No gold. No gold. But a patch of red dust in a circular shape on the ground. Couldn't work it out at first. And then a terrible thought came to him. And he turned and ran back along the path, all the way back to the cottage, pushing through the door into the kitchen, straight up the stairs. His wife, like, just disbelieving what on earth was going on. He pulled the little box out, got out the key, turned it, opened the box. Red dust. He let out a terrible wail and then sobbed his heart out. And his wife came up the ladder, sat down beside him, put her arms around him, and just stroked his head until he eventually calmed down. "Now, my love," she said, "will you please tell me what's been going on?" And so he did. The whole story from beginning to end. And when he had finished, she said to him, "Oh, Darius, did you not listen to the stories your grandmother told you? If you had, you would have known that the fair folk can appear in the shape of a hedgehog. And you would have known that if they get their red dust into your house, then they can gain access. You have put us in great danger. But worst of all, you have put our daughter in great danger. For it is well known that the fair folk carry away babies." "I'm so sorry," he said. "I thought I was going to surprise you. I thought I was going to make our lives so much better. But we have everything we need," she said. "We have each other. We have our daughter. We have enough. And we're happy." "What can I do?" he said. "Just do exactly as I tell you. And from now on, listen to the stories that your grandmother told. First, you are to go outside, take the box, put it in the fire, take off your clothes, put them in the fire too. Then you and I will scrub this house from top to bottom to make sure there is not a speck of dust left. Then we will close up the doors and windows and the shutters, and we will stay guard all night long over our child." And so they did all those things. And when midnight struck, if they had had the shutters open, they would have seen a little hedgehog come up the garden path and sniff around the door and put its little paws up and push at the door. They would have seen it trying to find a hole here or there to get into the house, and not able to do so. They would have seen that little hedgehog rise up on two legs and its arms lengthen. They would have seen that it was a little man dressed in red with a long, long beard and a long, long pointed hat. And they would have seen that little man try to turn the handle of the door. And when he could not, he finally gave up, turned around and walked down the garden path and back towards the woods. And they never saw the Draenog again. And, of course, they lived happily ever after together. And I imagine that after that time, Derry Rees was much more interested in learning the stories of his grandmother, and that they would have told those stories to their beautiful little daughter. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, it's probably time now to start to wrap everything up and go on and live happily ever after.
Ever after.
Happily ever after.